Hello, welcome to the AI Lead Show, where we help business leaders and IT teams navigate AI-powered transformation. Because let's be real, AI is everywhere, but not all of it is real or useful. I'm Dr. Brian Lambert, and we're going to talk about getting started with AI today and what it takes to move AI into the enterprise. Thanks for joining. Chat anytime through any of the platforms that we're streaming to: LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook Live. Appreciate you here. Our emphasis today is on making AI decisions and how to make informed decisions that are separated from the hype of consumer AI, and to think about not only how we get started with AI, but how do we scale it. AI success is heavily dependent on the people to drive adoption, as well as the data that underpins AI. So our panel today, our experts are AI leaders who've been in the trenches deploying, scaling, and working with people in the AI world. We've got Orchestrator. He's a business leader that's helped deploy AI in a variety of different use cases and examples. We've got Activator that's helped people get AI implemented and rolled out, focused on helping execute. We also have Scaler, who helps companies scale AI beyond just AI projects. So drop in the chat. What's your biggest AI question? What have you heard? What are you struggling with? And is your company or organization actively deploying AI? Let us know where you're at. All right, every show we start with a bit of a technology check-in, and we're going to talk about some news. First, you probably heard about it. Hey, will AI replace jobs? Jobs is really not true. The idea of the shakeup in the job market is indeed real. The question is where are those jobs being displaced to? There's quite a lot of open positions. Where are they, and how do we navigate to there? So we'll eventually have a show about the shifting market dynamics. The other piece of this that we're seeing in the news is AI is custom. It's about personalization and tailoring. How do you get started with that? Successful AI implementation requires data. It requires process. It requires a lot of work to integrate it into the enterprise, and it's a complex technology. So how do we get started with that? And then there's a lot of awareness starting to bubble out of the surface here around the idea that not all LLMs, not all platform models are the same. The reality is that AI is powerful, and it does indeed work for specific use cases, but how do we actually apply it effectively in our own organization? So let's double click some more on the news from this past week. I don't know if you heard it, but AI at Accenture, they have launched. AI is moving from theory to practice in a lot of different industries. So let's highlight some of those. The Accenture Refinery is a library of industry-specific AI agents designed to enhance workforce productivity. Why does that matter? Well, generic AI isn't enough. Organizations need custom AI solutions that specifically tailor to industry challenges. And that's a great use case that Accenture is looking at, is how do you make specific AI agents? They have a focus to reach 100 AI solutions, showing a clear roadmap beyond just piloting AI and trying AI. We also see in the news in the past week, SAP is focusing on practical AI deployment, specializing in models that are actionable and useful as opposed to hype-driven. SAP is shifting from generic AI to enterprise-ready AI models. Their foundation model processes structured business data because AI that understands real business processes is much more useful than just a generic chatbot. Also, AI agent adoption. 2025 is the year of the agent. We've talked about that on the previous show, but the idea that agents and agentic AI is helpful, let's test that with high-performing employees. Many businesses are looking at AI agent technology, but starting with the right people is key. Instead of launching AI for everybody, companies in the news are piloting AI with high performers to understand what actually happens in cross-functional work, and more importantly, the value that's created when these high-performing employees work with AI. You're also seeing in the news scaling up from pilot projects. AI isn't staying in the lab anymore. A huge explosion published by Microsoft and OpenAI on the adoption of AI, moving beyond pilot projects. In 2025, companies are taking AI from small pilots to full-scale implementation. For example, in the insurance industry, I found an article by Metromile and Lemonade that they're using AI to personalize policies and automate claims processing. So that's some of the headlines. And what I want to do is kind of double click on the SAP one. Their focus on practical AI deployments. This is important because SAP's bold move toward practical AI is moving beyond just experimentation. AI is evolving from simple assistants to business orchestrators. SAP's AI agents now handle critical operations across global enterprises, helping companies automate. And this is important because AI is shifting from passive support to active business decision making. One size fits all AI is fading, and SAP is developing industry specific AI models for retail, for manufacturing, for healthcare, telecom, etc. AI is now a core strategy, not an experiment in many organizations. They point to a 42% increase of moving to SAP powered, AI powered business operations in their organizations that they work with. And they're seeing that AI copilots are actually integrated into 80% of the workflows. So a lot of action and activity and specific examples in the industry specific view of launching enterprise AI. So let's bring our panel back and have some commentary here. Y'all, what do you think about these news stories? What jumps out at you from what you're hearing about the practical implementation and getting started with AI?
Ryan, I'll jump in.
Oh, go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's
So, to me, it's an old saying, follow the money. So it's clear that some of the logos you just flashed up there, Brian, if you look at SaaS in the early days, there was a couple of no-name logos that were behind SaaS, software as a service. But in the AI game today, there's literally hundreds of billions of dollars with some of the largest companies in the world. And they're not just throwing money at it, they're throwing resources and people at it. In other words, they're eating their own dog food right out of the gate. So that's something that stands out to me after looking at some of those quotes.
I think mine was kind of the same vein. It was not so much follow the money, but look at the organizations again, the leaders that are doing this, right? SAP, obviously, Accenture, two huge organizations that are leading this. So if they're doing it, obviously others are, and they're going to make the first mistakes first and lead the way for others. So makes sense.
I would definitely say what stood out for me was really about the idea that AI is replacing everybody. As you get to know more, read more articles, and really get a little deeper, it's really there to help augment a space that you really need augmented. That's busy work, right? Who wants to do busy work? I don't like busy work. I like the fact that I can compress my time down using something to help me so I can avoid hours of busy work. And if we're freeing up people so they can use their brains more in a business, how is that a bad thing? I think it's just great, right? This is what we've been waiting for.
Yeah, especially in these more tedious workflows. And I think it's important to remember that AI, as we know it today, is really an extension of machine learning and a lot of work that's happened in not only the data space, but in the data science space and the process space through automation, that we're able to really take the next step and start thinking about these workflows and more importantly, the humans in those workflows. Whereas in the past, maybe 10 years, a lot of the automation was at a machine level. Now there's a human aspect to this. So what tasks are being offloaded? And I talk about that in the book that I wrote around the idea that humans are going to need to start applying critical thinking, their creativity, and their ability to synthesize a lot of information and kind of move up the the wisdom chain, if you will, because a lot of these menial tasks and busy work were going to be happening with automation, with AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's important.
A different term to throw out there as opposed to job replacement. Why not job transformation?
Yeah, like that.
You know?
Yeah, and I think the word artificial intelligence has been a tough one for business people because we don't like to do artificial things. So what if we think about AI in the terms of amplifying our intelligence? How do we use it to do things that we do better? And amplifying our intelligence is a great way to make an impact. The challenge is how do you harness that in your job and transform your value using your AI expertise and your AI tools and your ability to get those inputs. So it's how's it an amplifier, right? And I think that's a big aspect of where AI is heading. That's why agents are so critical today. These agent workflows and the ability to convert a lot of information into something actionable, right? And so we can take action on it.
I also like that it can be a subject matter expert, right? I mean, think about how hard it is to find knowledge workers sometimes, how there's a really big deficit across the board when you think about what people really need to be successful in their companies. And if we have this ability to really tap into that subject matter expertise in a different way, it can help us be better in those situations where there's not enough skill. It's just not available, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So in this, we hear a lot about AI all over LinkedIn, all over Facebook. You're seeing once you get past the other stuff, you see some focus on AI. But really, it's really prevalent in LinkedIn. There's so much happening with AI on LinkedIn. So it's like, how do we separate, and how do our listeners and viewers separate the hype from reality when it's about taking these small steps in the enterprise? And, when you watch these YouTube videos of these very, very well done and very highly polished YouTube videos to see what the promise of these AI agents are, or the promise of AI in general, those are great. And it's a lot of interesting information. Then you come back to the reality of your organization. And we're going to explore that today as we look at this idea of getting started with AI to start sorting through the hype versus the reality. There are a lot of AI vendors that want to impact and are promising an impact in enterprise AI. And when you think about enterprise AI and the investments that are being made and the investors that are investing in companies to leverage AI, they want to invest in that. So there are quite a few vendors that are hyping up their ability to make AI work. At the same time, individuals are probably doing shadow AI, and they're leveraging AI in their work, but not necessarily telling anybody. So we have this idea that I can be productive, and you may have seen this on LinkedIn. I certainly have. Well, with AI, I can have 4 jobs, or 3 jobs, and that's right. A lot of hype, or I don't know if you've seen these videos on YouTube, but hey, you can go make millions of dollars being an AI expert. Go take our course, right? So that's a lot of hype. Then you have processes that have to be created that need to be working in an organization when many people don't understand the process in the first place. So you have this, hey, let's go change everything with agents. But in my view, in my workflow, I only understand these 4 tasks. And sure, I collaborate with everybody, but I have no idea what happens before I get involved and what happens after. That's somebody else's job. Well, the concept of an agent is to do those tasks, but also as we start about automating agents, they have to happen in a process. So how does that process actually work? Who's instrumenting that process for the good of the organization when you're in your silo? And then the idea of let's follow the money. That's great. I totally agree with that concept. There's a lot of money being spent, but there's also I think my hypothesis is there's a lot of money being wasted in fits and starts and attempts. And an example of this would be I can code a lot of different screens. I can go code a lot of different UI in my role, but can I actually turn it into real code that can be deployed? And there's actually an article from a couple of weeks ago that says code quality is actually going down because there is no consistency and QA happening in these heavily AI driven IDEs, these development programs programmers use. So like, who's watching all that stuff? Right. So this is a bit of a dilemma. We have this promise. We have a lot of money. We have the year of the agent. We have organizations at the very top of the pyramid that are pulling in a lot of talent, that are hiring hundreds, if not thousands, of AI developers and architects. And we're in a new space that's only a couple of years old. So like, what do we do with that? Right. So what do you think about that panel from maybe orchestrator? From a business perspective, what are some of the challenges that you've seen or helped your customers or clients with as they've tried to sift through the hype?
So to pick up on a point I made earlier about follow the money, this is an interesting market because literally there's $1 trillion being spent in the coming years on this. So what does that mean? I've been in markets where somebody's up on stage pitching an idea and you know full well they don't have the product. In other words, they're basically pitching this big idea to see whether or not somebody's going to buy it and consume it. That's not this, right? We're 10 years into AI being built out. Does it do human reasoning? No. Does it work instantaneously out of the box? No. But the underlying infrastructure, for those that have been in software development for a few decades, is there. This is that garage band. I used this quote on the last call, Brian, that suddenly now has got a couple of hits like ChatGPT, and it's out of the gate. And an example that I used the other day was somebody who wanted to start using this from a strategy standpoint. That's one of the examples I wanted to use. I said, I was at a zoo the other day. I took a picture of an animal that I didn't know what it was. And AI then gave me an understanding of what it was and gave me stats about that animal that I never knew. So I was being educated by AI on the fly. So now take that human example at the zoo and apply that to a contract that you kind of sort of know what the contract terms are, but you end up sending it to a lawyer to decipher it for you, right? The legalese. Take a picture of the contract. Let it come back and tell you, in this case here, what that contract is about. Have it summarize possible gaps in the contract. Have it take a look at your business. And this is, and I know we're going to get into kind of the backgrounder that AI is on its own not that good about your business. You got to train it about your business. Use these examples, whether it be a day at the zoo or a day looking at contracts. But now let me get to one last example. This is somebody who does a lot of work in construction, and they have to go through 5 to 10 specs. And a spec could be 500 pages long and understand the project. Well, if you've got 5 specs, hundreds of pages of length, how could you possibly sift through that and do a bid later tomorrow? AI is your go-to resource for that. So I throw out these examples because the quicker you start using these examples in practice, the quicker you can start conveying to your company, who cares if it's a RAG database or a vector database, but here's what I did with it.
Yeah, I love that. Activator, what do you think from your perspective? Where do companies kind of go wrong as they're getting started with deploying and scaling AI?
Yeah, I think that's a great question here. And honestly, for me, I think I'm really concerned about following the money because if the vendors are driving this train, then companies are not owning their strategy. They need to own their strategy. And if they're going to be influenced by where all these vendors are spending money, maybe sold on it, they do need to really take the time to understand what it means so that they're not making a mistake for their strategy, right? And it's in alignment with what they're trying to achieve. So if they're going to lean into these vendors that are making these great innovations, they really need to take the time to think through how they want it to benefit their organization. Start in one area. Maybe it's something that is a lot of data that needs to be sifted through, but start small. Don't let the vendors sway you as an organization.
And this live stream is sponsored by nobody.
Perfect. I love that. That's even better.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm my AI right now.
Yeah, and I think there's this interesting. In business we like to use the word scaling. So I'm going to ask Scalar. What do you think from your perspective? why do companies struggle to scale AI, let alone get started?
Well, there's really kind of two things. First of all, what I was surprised in the research that I was doing that, roughly 80% of AI projects fail, right? Surprisingly. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but companies start piloting and then they want to scale, right? But with AI, it's a little different in terms of, how do you do that? When you think scaling, you think things like infrastructure needs to be robust, right? AI is something that has to continuously adapt. It has to be enterprise-wide integration. And at the basis, it starts with, we talked about this before. So if you're doing a pilot and you're using AI, you're probably going to use data that's very structured, very clean, right? Easy to use, and it's already been vetted so that we can check it out. Well, that's not what's going to happen when you scale, right? Because lots of times you're going to have to, if not most of the data that's going to have to be ingested, it's going to be unstructured. And then when you're piloting, well, computational power, the models don't need that much to do because you're working in such a small data set. But once you integrate this, how much computational power do you need, right? And then, of course, there's integration challenges across all your systems that you're going to need to make sure that everything connects and talks together. And then what about real world conditions when you scale, right? What happens with ongoing monitoring? Do things degrade as you move forward due to the size of it? And then lastly, I think as you're going to get into scale, certainly data privacy, risk, bias, regulatory concerns. So you would think that they're thinking about all these things when they're piloting and going to be scaling, but maybe they don't. And it seems that the same reasons we failed in the past and other endeavors, it's always the human element. We want to jump in too fast and take advantage of this new shiny thing, and we're not clear why we're using it in the first place.
FOMO.
Fear of missing out. Absolutely. And I think that's a great segue into what's the opportunity here. And when you think about scaling really too fast, right? That's what you're talking about. Scalar is the idea of, hey, this worked, let's scale it everywhere and get it for everybody. Or on the flip side, hey, let's pilot it to everybody. Let's pilot it on our customer facing site and see what happens, right? We had a show on that. That's not a good idea. So how do you pilot? How do you get started? One, and then how are you thinking about these design elements, especially from a security perspective, a privacy perspective, an integration with the rest of your enterprise perspective, right? There are a lot of things that you want to do to make sure the pilot works when you're getting started. And perhaps that's why a lot of these pilots are struggling to get out beyond the pilot stage. And that's an issue because you're back to the human element of how do you drive change? How do you get investment for that pilot? How do you actually change how people work, which is the great promise of AI, to change how people work and make everybody's work easier, faster, better, more impactful. Well, what if your enterprise processes aren't set up to do that? And what's going to happen there? There's a lot of change challenges. So what I'd love to do is bring in Orchestrator on this slide here and this content that we're showing on the screen, which is really a maturity model approach that you've developed to think through all the way from the base of a random AI exploratory phase, all the way up to more of a level 5 where AI is more transformational. What do you think about that, Orchestrator, and sharing with us how people can get started and thinking about it from a maturity model lens?
My example earlier about taking a picture of a contract is just simply to start it going, to get a sense for what it's capable of doing. And I think most people have come back when I give them simple examples like this and said, I've never thought about using AI for that. So that's very tactical. But now let's pivot, right? Let's get more strategic. And Brian, you and I have been working together for about 20 years now. Once you go strategic with an idea, you very quickly convey to the organization that this is not tactical. And if AI is viewed as tactical, it's not going to, like any initiative, it's not going to work. So when you look at this model here, and the reason I like this model a lot is you've got to start somewhere, and it's typically in random. You've got experiments going on, you've got pilots going on. I like to call them proof of concepts because these proof of concepts shouldn't go away. They're not throwaways. They're basically ways for you, and I'm going to use two examples, ways for you to get started, to have enough wins so you can go back to your executive team, the team that went to a conference recently on AI and came back super excited. And then the reality formed that you couldn't just buy one of these technologies. You actually had to train it. So I'll use an example of a company where we are loading up specifications, strategy documents, legal documents, and we're now beginning to train the model, right? It's not intelligent on its own about your business. And I love the point that was made that, this is strategic and you have to think there. So if you could set a course in the next 3 months to move from random AI to foundational AI, that's a good bar to set. Because at that point, once you get to foundational AI, so what does that mean? To me, there's 4 elements of this, Brian. I think you heard me talk about this in the past. People to begin with, right? They're the context providers, and AI sucks without good context. Then you've got, in this case here, the process. Everybody's got a process, whether or not they use it or not. They probably end up using a hybrid sales process, marketing process, demand gen process. We've had a lot of it over the years. And then it's going to be content. Now, the best part of this, and the point was made earlier, is that you don't have to do this stuff from scratch anymore. You can gen content that you had to do from scratch. And it's actually, once you train the model, pretty meaningful. So it's people, process, content, then it's technology. I like to put it in that order because once you have that, then you have foundational AI, and then you can take a look at, the year of the agent. I do like that term, but before you get to the year of the agent, an agent for outreach, an agent for customer sat, an agent for everything. If you have foundational in place, what's foundational based on? How are you going to grow in 25, 26, and 27? Find out 3 ways of growing. Is it going to be through acquisitions? Are you going to raise capital? Are you going to do it organic? Those are 3 different scenarios. Pick one of the 3 or a combination thereof, then put the foundation in place to make that happen. This is a multi-year thing, Brian, and I know you and I talked about this. How else could you do a strategic thing but to think about this as a multi-year thing? If you start by buying technology, something that's infamous here in the United States versus further east, where they watch us experiment. If you start off with experimenting with these technologies, you're probably going to have limited experience. And I better stop there. But yeah, I'm a big fan of looking at this more strategically.
Absolutely. And I think I like your model, moving from experimental or exploratory to something that's more foundational and plugged in, and then moving into more of a guided generative approach where it's more personalized and tailored, bundling that together into something that's optimized, perhaps at a department level, and then thinking about how AI becomes a capability or a strategy for success. And when you look at that, there are many different aspects to it. I love the process piece, the content information piece, the idea of the people, right? And then technology always being last, because technology is a catalyst. And just like any other technology, AI can catalyze super awesome things, and it can catalyze really crappy things and do things really bad based on the underlying data and information. It's a catalyst. So, no data, you're not going to have any AI. No data, no AI. Bad data, bad AI. Slow data, slow AI.
So it's a people issue.
Yes.
It is an enable issue. Brian, if I can jump in on that point, because if somebody's looking at this model right now and thinking they want to get to number 4, can you do number 4 without doing number 2? Can you really? And what's interesting is if you don't have a path to get there, right? If you aren't measuring a path to get there. I didn't talk about guided and strategic, but look at guided as throwing agents and AI technology at the problem. Again, without foundational, you're not repeating something. So how could you measure whether or not it was successful if it was random? And I'll stop there, but I purposely stayed away from guided and strategic because of the 140 people that have gone through our AI maturity assessment online. Guess how many are at level 3 and 4?
0.
0. So it's a very, and the one that did say they were at 4, they said they wanted to pique my interest. So, they're not there yet. It's really days.
That's the great thing about methodology, though. It looks really great on paper. It's the execution that's difficult, right? And where do you need to really lean into from a change perspective? And what does that really look like? And I loved how you started with people here, because we can't do it without the people.
Yes.
I know we like to think or put news stories out there that AI is replacing people, but if you're going to put it inside your organization, you're not replacing all your people. You do need your people to make it happen. So they have to be the first priority to get that human role nailed down, understood, and connected back to the strategy and the opportunity to use that AI. So I definitely am leaning really hard into that perspective here, and I really liked it.
And if we think about AI as an amplifier, right, amplify intelligence, there is a lot of wisdom in our people that can be amplified, right? The good
Yes.
things that people do to be more customer centric, or to do better discovery with clients, or to build better products, those good things can be amplified with the right AI approach. It is not all doom and gloom. Like, some people might be a first time viewer or listener and say, well, why would I get involved from a people perspective to have this thing replace me? Like, why would I do that?
Yeah, because we're not replacing you. And that needs to be part of that change and communication strategy. This is not a replacement. This is augmentation. This is enabling you to do your job better. It's giving you more opportunity to do what you want to do for our company, right? That's where we need to take it.
Yeah. And a great chat from Ken listening to the show. Thanks for that, Ken. You need humans for input validation and exception handling. They're still in the loop. Great comment. I appreciate that. So let's take a quick break. We'll be right back, and we're going to continue this with the process and the actual upside of how do you get started.
Are you drowning in data, yet starving for insights?
There has to be a better way.
Introducing the AI Lead, your guide to overcoming data drag and accelerating digital dominance. Discover how to eliminate inefficiencies, transform data into a competitive advantage, and achieve digital dominance with actionable AI strategies.
With the AI Lead, we're not just keeping up, we're leading the charge.
Industry leaders call it a must-read for future-ready executives. Master change, lead with command. Visit AILeadbook.com and unlock the blueprint to digital success today.
All right, so let's help people take action and get started. What I'd love to do is borrow from the AI Lead book and talk a little bit about some practical things that I've seen and also that I recommend. One is definitely take the time to filter out the noise. Through this conversation that we're having here, you can start thinking about what's your checklist to vet these ideas. And the first checklist item should be, are they hyping up a consumer AI approach versus an enterprise AI approach? That's the first filter that I would recommend to separate the noise from reality. If they're not talking about the enterprise AI side, don't get bought into the hype that you can simply bring this in and make a massive impact. A lot of work needs to happen in collaboration. The second thing I would recommend to get started and to make that breakthrough is to take a leadership role and figure out how AI can help achieve business goals. Be part of that solution, not dig your heels in. I've sent a couple of notes to people on LinkedIn, as seeing if they're interested in talking about AI. And one person who had a transformation title actually said, well, why would I involve AI in what I'm doing so it can just replace me? Even though they had the word transformation in the title, I thought that was fascinating. So in the context of transformation, what's the role of AI in driving business goals? If we're not clear on that, then how are we going to take a leadership role? Third thing is to define what AI success looks like. If we define it as replacing humans, that's going to be the criteria. If we look at it as amplifying intelligence, that's another criteria. And more importantly, if we define it as Satya Nadella did in terms of impact, what if it improves the overall growth rate of an economy? That's yet another way to look at AI success. And then to Scalar's point, let's avoid this pilot graveyard. Let's make sure that we've taken the time to think through the things that are going to get asked about when we move from piloting to production. And that's things like security, enterprise architecture, the ability of our DevOps team to actually build and deploy, the bandwidth of our engineering team to actually deploy, the ability of our partners to help us be successful with our objectives. All of these things I talk about in the context of a speed layer in the AI Lead. And all of those things, thinking about them from the very beginning, are critical to getting started with AI. At the same time, there's this balancing act of if you sit around and plan and you don't do anything, you're never going to learn, and you're never going to figure out the right way. So it becomes this idea that we need to unpack here of the reality of we have to think these things through. We have to protect the business with the idea of we need to be innovative and creative and follow what works. So love to hear from the panel here on what do you all think about this, and what advice would you give for people to actually achieve a bit of a breakthrough here against seemingly, barriers that seemingly to be outside of your purview, perhaps not my job, not my issue. This is for somebody else to figure out. What recommendations would you have to achieve some breakthrough here and get started?
Well, it's obviously we're talking about leadership, right? And obviously maybe first looking at why these projects have failed in the past, and now we're talking about how we can break through, not just failing, but let's not be over ambitious in our applications, right? Let's make sure we have our infrastructure in place. But there's kind of like all those steps that organizations would want to take to implement something long term to make sure that their business model is going to change and be intact, right? Around, hey, what are our long-term goals? Let's define them. Let's make sure our data drag is addressed, right? So that we're able to integrate all our data and we're able to have everything talk in real time. Let's make sure that, again, we've got all the components that we need from an architecture standpoint. One of the things I think that's missed out on is that, is this your kind of feedback loops and continuous learning mechanisms, and having AI adoption, AI literacy centers within your organization, right? All those types of things. And, then lastly, there's, trying to be technologically agnostic. So don't get tied into one particular technology when you're rolling this out. And I think lastly is we talked about ethical responsibilities, making sure that that's something that you want to address. And then what is it that you're trying to achieve, right? Again, from AI adoption, what are the KPIs that you really want to measure? And I know that all sounds very foundational and basic, but it's the same type of steps that you would take any new endeavor, and you just want to overlay those onto how we're going to embrace AI within the organization.
Yeah, I'll pick up on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to have a go. And I would say the most important thing if you're a leader, or even if you're at an employee level, is to just start learning and getting some education about what is going on so that you can have input into what's next. Because if leaders and employees are not leaning into learning about what is happening with AI, then I don't know how they can develop a strong strategy. Because if they are going to let other people lead the way, then they are not taking a hold of their strategic outcome here. So I really think that's very important. And how best to filter the noise than to start learning and having conversations and doing the research. I think that's really critical. And then you can figure out how it aligns to your business goals and what that success is going to look like, while also figuring out how much it's going to cost, right? I think we haven't talked about that at all today, but the ROI needs to be there because this is strategic for your organization. If there's no ROI, what are we doing, right? We need to understand how financially it's going to help move the needle on where we're trying to take our organization.
I'll pick up on that ROI point. So, the bar is going higher and higher. So you can actually write an AI agent today to not just do the work. This is not an application where you got to feed the beast. It's actually doing the work. So because it's doing the work, you can give an ROI right on the spot. And I had a client say that, these specs I used to review takes me half as long. So if they're doing 3 hours of spec review, they just saved an hour and a half. So that said, I think you can tie ROIs actually to these agents because, again, they actually do the work. They're little digital workers that complement people. But Brian, I want to come back to execution. I know that we talk a lot about theory, but then we have to talk execution because if we don't, how do we get clients' attention? And I have a client that told me in their AI assessment that they're going to grow through expanding with new offices. And I asked them the question, obviously it was a leading question, how are you going to use AI? What do you mean use AI? We're going to be going to Phoenix. I've got some contacts down there. I said, there's a human element, but how are you going to use AI? And I said, let's start here. Let's take a look at the competition. Let's take a look at different areas of this location. let's use AI to strategically look at where gaps are and then look at the demographics. Then let's look at AI. Now I'm going to get more tactical to do the job description. And then it generated the post. Then it did the blog. You see where I'm going with this. We were basically taking a major use case, opening a new office. And for those that have been part of, large scale expansion, opening up a new office is extremely expensive, and you want it to produce sooner than later, clearly. So you can use AI for all the things that I just mentioned, from strategy to hiring. And one individual said they're going to hire 5 estimators in the next 3 months. And he goes, where can I put the other 75 resumes of those who I don't hire? And I said, well, it's funny you asked that, because we're going to save those. And then we're going to ultimately analyze who you hired and then how their bids looked and if they were profitables and who you didn't hire. But that's going to come in the optimized layer, and that's later this year. The foundational part is a big deal. But I do like that example of, expansion and then basically assigning AI to the job, so to speak, overall. Because once that option, or I should say that new office becomes successful, you can tie AI to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is a big shift that we're getting to here. And while we're definitely encouraging everybody to start small, you have to realize that we're in a new age. We're in the AI age. Let's just draw a line from 2 years ago when ChatGPT launched. The industrial age is over, and yet we carry through to today, 2 years later, 2.5 years later, a lot of remnants of the industrial age, including our thinking of how we compartmentalize work, how we launch an office, how we build software, how we relate to one another. But I got to tell you, when you look at it from an economics perspective or from an ROI perspective, the engine for creating value is completely different now. What I mean by that is the idea that knowledge workers in their heads were the engine of the knowledge economy. And in the industrial age, 4th industrial revolution, we're going to have automate what's in our heads. That is the limiting factor in the AI age. What happens between our ears is actually a limiting factor, because AI can outproduce and outthink us. The ability to crunch the numbers, to synthesize the data, to wade through the anomalies, to look for patterns. We are not necessarily we're not the smartest in the room anymore as individuals. We have to recognize that they're smarter than us. I mean, I'll say it. AI is smarter than me. That used to scare me to death. And it used to be, I would never say that publicly, but the reality is it is. The GPUs involved, Elon Musk has hundreds of thousands of graphic processor units in Texas crunching massive problems right now that I can't even get my head around. I mean, let's be real. So the ability to transfer capital into actual work that's valuable is massively accelerated in the AI age. The key is do we understand how to convert raw materials, raw ideas, data, information, problems into something that's valuable. And if you look at conversion and converting things into something valuable, AI is a great catalyst for that in the right hands. And that's why I call it amplifying intelligence, because AI fundamentally changes the cost structure of labor. You're seeing it right now, and how many people are losing their jobs. The cost structure of labor is reshaping entire industries by replacing the effort to wait through patents for years and months. The ability to go into a U.S. government and track spending and do it in 2 days and 2 seconds versus years and years, or in some cases, we could never do that as humans, right? Like we have to get real about what's happening with this ability to convert problems into action. But there's a possibility in that. I'm not being doom and gloom. This is where the breakthrough is, because you can free your mind from these industrial shackles that hold us back. And you can think about, how do we serve our customers better? How do we cure cancer? How do we develop new ways to solve a problem that's been annoying us for 25 years as knowledge workers? How do we move beyond the idea of an org chart that people tell me what to do so that I can create value in different ways, right? There's an unlimited amount of possibility in that once we free our mind. And I'm sorry for the soapbox on this, but this is what makes me think about embracing the idea of AI. And, if you're in a staffing industry, your breakthrough is there are new jobs that'll be created that nobody's asking for. That's your opportunity. That's your breakthrough. What jobs will people be asking for? If you only staff what people are asking for, you're not going to be ready when people ask for a new job called AI ethicist. They're going to find that from somebody else. So are you going to skate to the puck on that, or are you going to wait for somebody to tell you what to do? Right. So there's a breakthrough in that. Hey, we want to go to Mars. Well, that's crazy talk. It might take forever,
I would add to that, Brian. People just need to make the decision. It's the red or the blue pill. I know you guys love my movie references, but are you going to be in the matrix or out of the matrix? And if you don't decide now, it will be decided for you. So you should take hold as a human and be the human, stay the human, work on that part, right? And use AI to the advantage of the greater good, right?
And that's the breakthrough. That's the accelerated breakthrough is you could be one of those people that's in the Western town in the United States watching an automobile go by while you're sitting on your horse saying, that's crazy talk. I'll never get an automobile.
Yes.
Or you could get curious about what the automobile is and figure it out and see if you want to tinker with one. Like, really, that's what we're talking about, So that's the opportunity. That's the breakthrough. And it's all mindset, right? The technology exists to do everything I'm talking about. I'm not talking crazy from a technology perspective. What I'm talking crazy, if you're listening to this, is probably from a human perspective. It's a mindset thing. It's your choice, like Activator was saying.
Say, Brian, you had me at the Wayne Gretzky quote, so I'm good.
Skating to the puck. You want to explain that to anybody that's not from Minnesota? Just kidding. Yeah. So let's continue with that. Let's talk about some steps that people can take once they get past my soapbox moment there. First is, like Activator said, educate yourself and educate the teams. Think about the wild possibilities. What if I'm not crazy, where every job that's displaced, a new one will be created? What if that's not crazy talk? How would you align your work and your projects to business needs? How do you run one small project inside your organization and figure that out and start building a bridge to your development team, building a bridge to your engineering team, building a bridge to your legal team? Probably there's some things to work through on the legal side. How would you be proactive to start asking those questions? And then how would you move beyond the pilot? And more importantly, and I talk about this in the AI lead book, but what is the definition of a good pilot? Like, what's the criteria for good pilot? Do you have one? Right. So what do you think, team, about these 4 steps? And what advice do you have for our listeners and viewers?
I just they're all good, but number 3, run one small project first, right? Figure it out. Get a team together. Get some feedback on how it's working. Get comfortable with it, right? And then begin to expand outside your organization. Just as we brought up earlier, where your first step isn't, hey, let's use AI to create something that's going to face our audience. No, you don't want to start there, right? Let's start internally, where we can make mistakes and play in a sandbox where we're not going to get hurt. So I think that's just basic common sense, but I'd love step 3.
I love educate your teams, but I think I'd say it differently. And Brian, I'm just going to lean into what you said about the industrial age. We got to unlearn right now. We need to start unlearning all of that industrial age framework and start learning about what's going to be next and figure out how we're going to shape it, right? So I think that's really the important part here, is if we're not willing to unlearn some of these things that are in our way, then we will no longer have a voice. And it's important that everybody figures out what that voice is as a part of getting to the strategy. So if the strategy is still aligned to what you said earlier with the industrial point of view, then that strategy isn't the right strategy. We've got to figure out what it is, be curious, be open, have more possibility, think differently.
I'm going to use a small project example. And I agree with everything I was just said there, because in the end, all these things that you're showing here are super important, Brian. So I use an internal example because, again, it's a sandbox internal. That point was made a minute ago there. And I have an agent now that's connected to a workflow that wakes up every morning at 8 o'clock and it does its digital worker thing. What does it do? It finds who I'm meeting with that day off my Google Calendar. I'm going to go a little technical here. Then a little, but not a lot. And then it finds not just the Google Calendar, it then finds their LinkedIn profile. It then finds them. It does then a disc profile of the individual. It then looks at their website. This is all done through agents. So it's learning about the people I'm going to meet with that day. And the final step, it sends me an email and updates the CRM. So
Wow.
if you look at the way in which you conduct your meetings today, that's a game changer. But that was our first internal project. And I worked with a company out of California to do this. And the cool part of it is it does those things, finds the people I'm going to be meeting with. It does a disc profile. If you guys like disc, it does any methodology on profiling people and understanding their interest. It actually also does a value chain where it suggests what they believe is a value. But it does that before I start my day. And I don't start at 8, just so you know. And so when I do come in, I have all this sitting in my CRM. I have an email coming to me. And then I think to myself, if you did that for 3 sales calls in a row, 6 sales calls in a row, and now you have a digital footprint of all that, imagine at the end of this quarter, how much information I can go and take a look at. And yes, I use Otter for the notes during the call, but ultimately in the end, that was the project. And now having done that and worked with this company, one of the things that they recently improved was that it takes a look at if it hallucinates, it looks at errors, it uses the best LLM for the task at hand. So the innovation's there. It's we're now catching up to the innovation. But I would say though, it's not as smart as that, Brian. You still have to train it. You still have to build that workflow. You still have to think about your people. Has anybody rolled out DISC or any other kind of sales process and you're thinking to yourself, maybe I'll get 20% adoption? Well, what if an agent actually did the sales process for you? Think about that for a minute. What if it did the heavy lifting? Let's say you spin. Let's say it did the spin questions for you. These are the things that, if you want to give people time back in their day, if you want to do things kind of right through an agent, automate that stuff. Use that as your projects, your pilot projects, proof of concept projects. And so it's been exciting. And that didn't take that long to build that, by the way, but you have to still work with really smart people to get that done.
Absolutely.
What's interesting on that really quickly is that there are companies that are selling AI and selling agents to do that, but aren't eating their own cooking, that aren't doing it themselves for their internal people or their internal sales forces, oddly enough. Right? Interesting.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, let's talk about putting things into action. We're trying to tell some great stories here and some examples. And in our action in action section here, our segment, let's go around the horn and talk a little bit about how we're using AI, how we're deploying AI. One example that I have is building out products. When you're trying to build products and build more of an AI native application. There are a lot of features and functionalities in product development activities that are really a benefit from large language models and chatbots, et cetera. So, for example, I have a right-hand bot, if you will, an agent helper that helps me figure out what the requirements documents should be. That helps me mock up UIs even. To think about, hey, what should the user experience be as I'm walking through this functionality? I can also have it help me build out, if you're familiar with Scrum, the idea of the stories or what the feature functionality needs to be. So I built a bot for that to help me to make sure that everything is structured. I still have to look at it and I still have to make sure that it's clear. But my developers that I'm working with are blown away by how much detail they're getting, and it helps them move faster. So from that perspective, I'm using AI to be more clear, but from their perspective, they're spending less cycles figuring out what I'm trying to achieve, right? So I'm able to speed that up with just a simple bot. It's not even a full-blown agent workflow. So that's an example in the product development space. What about you, Activator? Any thoughts from your perspective? Any stories you want to share?
Yeah, I would also mention I saw Ken online talked about keeping the legal department in the loop. And that's really tied closely to HR and really thinking about the responsibility of everyone in the organization. So there's a lot of things that still need to be done, not just in getting something working, but thinking of the broader impact to all the different parts of the business that might need training, might need expectation setting, might need more information, right? So their job might change a little, right? And that's a good thing, but we need to be ahead of it. We need to know what that looks like. And that's that change management and communication piece. It needs to tie back to how we bring employees in. It needs to tie back to how we continue to help them learn as each of these different AI things become more of an enablement function in the organization.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just had a quick one. So think about how individuals use Waze, right? First of all, to help us navigate traffic patterns to get to where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of brought me into the research of a company that scaled very well. UPS, our friendly UPS drivers, right? And they have a system. They call it Orion, which is this, on the road integrated route optimization, right? So they've taken that, scaled that across how many cities, roads, right, across the United States, where they're now able to detect traffic patterns, weather changes, and it's connected to other components within their organization and scale that, and how it's they haven't compromised any of their efficiency or any of their service quality by doing it. And it's a real simple example, but they've been able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're looking at the time here. We're starting to wrap up. Any aha moments from the team? Anything that stands out at you is something you learned or something you'd want to reinforce based on the show today?
It seems like all the issues across the topics that we discussed were kind of human issues.
Mm-hmm.
With failing or not optimizing or not being able to scale, it wasn't the technology, it's the humans and how we're looking at it.
I was reminded of when I first started to work with you, Brian, when you talked about the industrial age, and remembering sitting in one of your sessions and just realizing how important it is to unlearn. I know it sounds like a weird thing to say, and it really stuck for me. Because when you think about technology innovation, if someone tells you to stop doing something that is a muscle memory, that is a part of your everyday routine, it is very difficult to change. So we have to be purposeful, every single one of us, every time we try to take something on new, because our muscle memory is going to fight us every time. And we're talking about years of muscle memory, right? It's not a day, it's not a week, it's years.
Yeah, pick up on that. I think it's true in any initiative. If I didn't do it yesterday, I most likely wouldn't do it today. And so how do we bring people to a point to where, all right, so I didn't do it yesterday, but maybe this should be really good. But I do think there's some differences here. I think there's enough weight behind this. That was the follow the money point, that the technology's there. Now it's the human element. We're the context providers. Brian, thanks for the invite again today, because if we're brainstorming about this, the one thing that I'm pulling away from this call is that all four of us have a perspective. All four of us need to be on the front end of this, because if this ends up being a technology play and we've seen that in the past, these tech plays, they poison the well. And so, you don't want to poison the well, because this one has an immediate impact. It does things like break down the departmental silos that we've been challenged with for over 20 years. It does that because AI doesn't give a damn. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes, but it is about context and people.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. And I want to encourage you all to show up and participate in our webinars. Every week we try to launch a new webinar. These are designed for you to watch in your environment, at your workplace, or send to others as educational resources to help get the word out on everything from how do I unlock AI? What are some of the use cases in AI? How should I think about getting started? Obviously, the live show is a great resource, but if you're looking for something that's a little bit more intentional, a little bit more slide driven, if you will, that you can share with others, definitely check out our webinars. They're on demand. and we try to run one every week. Also, from a planning perspective, make sure you mark your calendar every Friday at noon Eastern. Next week, we're going to talk and double click into AI use cases in a variety of different industries. We'll spend a little bit more time on the tech, which I encourage you to participate in. If you feel like tech things are for tech people and data things are for data people, you're not in the right zip code. In the AI age, we have to understand a little bit more about tech and data, and also business strategy is changing. So we need to have these conversations. We're going to get into that next week. So I definitely encourage you to show up to next week's show where we talk about AI use cases in action. So on behalf of Detangler and Orchestrator and Scalar, thanks so much for tuning in to the AI Lead Show. We'll see you next time, and I appreciate the conversation, appreciate the chats, and let's stay curious. See you next week.
See you all soon.